Greetings, Craddock here. Today we have a blast from the past, Taurasha Explosive Blast Wizard, coming back into the fore, and I've included all of my historic findings into all of these builds, the build variations, so I hope you enjoy them. One thing about this build, before we get into it, is that it does include the In-Geom, which is both a blessing and a curse. It gives you many benefits, but it also has the negative side, which is going to be if you don't have elite packs nearby, you can drop it, the bonus, and therefore your mobility suffers. So this is just something to be aware of. In my opinion, this is why it's going to be lagging a little bit behind some of the other Nephilim Rifting builds. That being said, it is really hard hitting. It's a lot of fun to play. So it's definitely one to check out in season. This is going to be a little bit of a later season setup. It's not a season starter for sure, particularly because you need such high cooldown reduction with this build to even get it going. So I would say it's like more of a mid-season to late season configuration and more for fun. So that's how I've approached this build when I put it together. Alright, let's start out with the primary build variation. This is the build variation I would think you would start out with earliest in season. It includes the most damage, the highest damage composition, but it still has a decent amount of mobility included in the build, which is really the build's weakness in my opinion, which is why you see so many mobility items in here. So to address that weakness of potentially not getting to elite packs quick enough, we have Illusionist in the mix for movement speed. We have the Boon of the Hoarder. Killing enemies will get the gold. Gold will give you movement speed. We have the Krelm's Buff Belt in the cube slot. Notably, you can also choose to run the Warzekians in this slot, but I found that that was less consistent. So over many rifts, I just felt that the Krelm's was better, especially since we are protecting our shields here, our health with shields. So as long as you have the In-Geom up, your Krelm's will be up as well. We do have the diamond skin in the mix, right? So one other thing that we're including this season, particularly because we have the follower edition, is we're swapping out Gogoko Swiftness. Gogoko Swiftness was really good for this build for giving us the extra cooldown that we needed to make it work. However, there really isn't that much benefit from the attack speed for that gem, or the dodge even. You don't necessarily need that extra toughness with this build variation. So with the Enchantress giving us that extra 10% cooldown reduction, and with the ability to swap in a cooldown affix on our amulet, we're just going to drop the Gogoko Swiftness straight out and go with the Wreath of Lightning for extra mobility here as well. Getting to those elite packs will be key. You have to kill the entire elite pack. So if it's a pack of yellows, you have to kill every ad as well to be able to proc this bonus. Notably, goblins will also proc the In-Geom bonus, so if there's a goblin in between two elite packs, definitely seek out killing that goblin. And yeah, basically what this item is going to do, it's going to reduce our cooldowns, letting us spam the Explosive Blast at an even quicker rate. We have this particular variation. I love the composition here because you don't really need an armor spell, and you don't really need Magic Weapon Deflection here. So what I've done is I'm actually gone Bone Chill in the optional skill slot. And Bone Chill, it freezes enemies when you cast it, and it applies a 33% additive damage bonus debuff to them. And this is additive with your skill damage, of which for this starting build we're going to have 30% on gear. So that's added in with the 33% debuff for a nice increase to damage for this earlier setup. Notably, you have the Captain Crimson's multiplier, you've got the Oghild's elite damage and multiplier, you have the Orb of Infinite Depth multiplier here with the Taurasha as well. So There are a lot of multipliers here. Audacity coming into the mix, Bane of the Trapped, big multiplier as well. So it's going to hit heavy, and especially with this extra additive on top of all that, it's going to make it feel even more smooth. The other benefit to running the hard freeze here is that you're constantly casting this with the In-Geom active. You're freezing enemies before they have a chance to damage you. So at these slightly lower paragons, when you first put this build together, it will be safer. Now, there's something to be said that sometimes when you freeze the enemies out of position, it can be harder to damage them because they're pulled apart. Well, that's why we include the black hole, supermassive, in the build. Going to be able to pull elite packs together specifically to be able to DPS them down. Even if they're frozen, you should be able to pull them at least once. The other elements for Tal Rasha, of course, are going to be, since this is lightning, this is fire, we have the Arcane on the teleport, Calamity, also a crowd control effect, and then we have the Glacial Spike, which is also a freeze. Very nice crowd control effect, so if you're under duress or whatever, you can just use your signature. Signature will also be nice for helping to proc the Focus and Restraint multiplier. I forgot to mention this, the Bastions of Will coming into effect. It's going to be a combined total of 2.25 times multiplier when you additionally cast your signature into enemies. So usually what I do is I'll click the pylon, my freeze will freeze them, or you can cast your signature, that will freeze them, and then you can cast your black hole to group up the elite. So getting that second level of damage or maintaining it when you encounter an elite pack with the Bastions of Will set is going to be important, as is grouping them up. So just casting those is going to be keeping you busy, right? Now, as far as cooldown is concerned with this build, we have the Evocation, Weapon, both rings, the gloves, shoulder piece, the diamond and the helmet. We have the enchantresses, as mentioned, skill, prophetic harmony, and the amulet as well. So it's a lot of cooldown reduction coming into effect here. Plus the Captain Crimson's, forgot to mention that, also gives 20%. So this gives you a combined total base cooldown reduction of 75%. Now you may think like, well, hey, you only need 50% to reduce with In-Geom the to the GCD of teleport. So technically you only need 50% to get this build off the ground, yes. However, personally I felt better knowing that I had a higher cooldown reduction base to work with to be able to start my In-Geom kill chain, if that makes any sense. Notably here, you won't get area damage with the Wand of Woe blasts. You're only getting area damage from the initial cast, right, of the Wand of Woe sequence. So I would advise, you know, if you want to remove area damage with this build, you can, but you don't have to. Resource is managed through the placement of Diamond Skin Prism, reducing the arcane power cost of all of our skills by 9, and this is after resource cost reductions. So it's a huge reduction, and especially since we keep it up pretty much all the time once you have an In-Geom bonus active, this is going to be pretty much provide you with most all of the resource required for this build. We are going to place a little bit of resource cost reduction from the Captain Crimson's, 20%, and then the weapon, you can fit a roll there, and then the All-Killed's shoulder piece, or sorry, the shoulder piece you can fit in, and RCR affix as well. Now there is something interesting that you can do at higher paragons, so I'm going to transition now and talk about the higher paragon setup. Is because the weakness of the build is mobility, you can drop the All-Killed's and get even more mobility by fitting in the Warzekian Arm Guards, and then the cube we would drop the Crowns and go Illusory Boots. So one of the weaknesses of the builds as well is that you're running into enemies quite often, and you can't pass through them or position your explosive blast. It's an AoE that's happening around you, a 12-yard AoE, so you have to be positioned correctly to optimize your damage, right? Or picking up items, that sort of thing. So having the illusory boots is actually more of a benefit than having a speed increasing item in the cube slot here, especially when you combine it with the Warzekian arm guards, I feel. Now, top priority when you're at lower Paragon is getting that extra little bit of speed, but once you are higher Paragon and you can drop the Oghild set, you definitely want to go for this combination instead. And the only reason that we're dropping this movement speed item is because we're also running a different rune on Diamond Skin. We're running Sleek Shell, not the cost reduction from Prism. Now, this will give an extra 30% move speed on top of everything that I've already mentioned, plus the 50% from Warzekians. It feels really consistent and really smooth. Now, the downside here is that because we're making all of these swaps, you don't have as much resource cost reduction to manage casting all of your, so you're going to rely more on a few different things. And we're actually running Power of the Storm to get our cost reductions down somewhat, but it's not going to help as much as Prism, but it is constant, so that is notable. And then we're running RCR on the gloves here, quad gloves, which is going to be harder to get, but I figure later in season you might have a pair of these lying around. And then on the source, you're actually going to want to run resource cost reduction. At really high Paragons, you can go quad source and drop the int for EB skill damage if you want, but I figure this will be fine. You can run RCR, or there are some alternate resource compositions that you can work with. You can go Arcane Power and Crit on the source as well. That is an option since you have a few high proc coefficient spells such as Magic Missile in the mix. That is an option as well. And then Astral Presence, going to be a nice passive Arcane Power regeneration option that you can mix in. Granted, I kind of felt that the Second Life passive here is the better choice, but you can opt this specifically also because we are running a Second Life passive on the Enchantress. So this build is really nice because since we don't need the extra attack speed, you can opt for that double Second Life configuration. So yeah. Anyways, it's a very safe setup in that sense, and I hope you enjoy it in season.